Hello, I am the Dark Master, and welcome back to the history of Mississippi. In this episode, we will be discussing the Cretaceous, more specifically the late Cretaceous, as this is the time where the fossil record of Mississippi finally picks up after the gap that existed since the Mississippian. At this time, Mississippi was once again almost completely underwater. Only the northeast corner of Mississippi was not under the sea, not counting the now dead Jackson volcano, that is. Don't worry, it's not active. It hasn't erupted in over 66 million years. The ocean that covered Mississippi split America in twine and is known as the Western Interior Seaway. Life in this seaway was huge. The bottom of the seaway lived a menagerie of life, familiar and strange. In the strange category, there were huge, giant clams. And I do mean giant. The Ichthyosis clams evolved such huge size as an adaptation to the oxygen-poor, muddy bottom where they lived, as the large size meant larger gills which could absorb more oxygen. Said oxygen-poor mud also preserved many of the fossils we find today. More familiar life forms also existed, including Torrelia sea snails, which still flourish today, as well as Dicoticaroid crabs, which still have relations crawling around, albeit in more tropical areas than they now. Spiny lobsters also crawled around, feeding on oysters, the large clams, and pea shrimp, which also flourished here. There was, however, one noticeable absence: the corals. This was because during the Cretaceous, tropical waters were between 6 degrees and 14 degrees warmer than those of today, and also more highly saline. This was not suitable to corals who were pushed closer to the poles, where they remained for the rest of the period until the Paleocene. The water was also filled with pelagic invertebrates, those that dwell in the top surface. The largest ammonites to ever live evolved in the late Cretaceous. It was Parapuzoacea. Some ammonites re-evolved a straight shell in the Cretaceous, reminiscent of the old orthocones that ruled. Belemnites achieved their most diversity during the Cretaceous as well. However, they were not to rule. All of these invertebrates provided food for large amounts of fish. The bony fish, no longer having much competition with the lobefins, even exploded in diversity. The Pleiadids were small fish that included Benagumes, who had sharp teeth and lived similar to modern angelfish. Belostomas was another extinct look-alike, resembling modern pikes, albeit living in the ocean. There was also even a swordfish look-alike, in the form of Protosymphiinae, of which there were 2 species. However, the most famous of all these late Cretaceous bony fish were the Ichthyodectids, which were large predatory basal bony fish. They included the underbiter, Saurodon, and the little X-fish, also called the bulldog tarpon. They were fierce predators that often died biting off more than they could chew. Also, they're one ugly fish. I mean, nightmare fuels ugly. The cartilaginous fish also thrived in this seaway. They ranged from the medium-sized Crocodilians and Squalicorax to the large Crocodilians, which exceeded the current great white in size. Much stranger was the smaller Scanthorhynchus, which has relatives still alive today in the form of the Goblin Shark. In fact, one genus, Odomatis, is still alive today. We know them as sand tiger sharks, though. Most alien of all the sharks, however, was Pitocodus, a hybodont. It was a rather large shark, but it wasn't a man-eater with sharp teeth. Rather, it had flattened teeth that he used to eat the mollusks that were huge at the time, like the large rudists. Hybodonts were a group of extinct sharks that mostly went extinct in the late Cretaceous due to competition from more advanced sharks and an asteroid impact. However, even the largest sharks had to be wary, for it was the reptiles that ruled the seas. Starting with the familiar face, let's talk about sea turtles. The very first quote-unquote sea turtles evolved in the late Jurassic with plesiocules. However, this wasn't related to modern sea turtles. Indeed, the first true sea turtles was the genus Desmotaceles, which was from the early Cretaceous. Modern sea turtles are divided into two groups, Panxelonidae and Pandermochales, which are the leatherback sea turtles. Pancheonidae, which include the more famous sea turtles, did not become numerous until the Paleocene. However, the other branch were the dominant turtles of the western interior seaway. While the modern leatherback sea turtle is already huge at 1.83 to 2.2 meters in length, or 6 to 7.2 feet for smart people, being the fourth heaviest reptile alive today, it was minuscule, however, compared to its prehistoric relatives, such as Prostega, which was 9.8 feet long, and the even bigger Archelon, which was the largest sea turtle ever, at 13 feet long. Now, Archelon was a gentle giant, but the other reptiles were decidedly less so. Last episode I discussed the Plesiosaurs, but in the Cretaceous they experienced a slight decline in numbers, but evolved some of their strangest forms yet. The Elasmosaurus had some of the longest necks in the animal kingdom. Several species inhabited the western interior seaway. The most famous is Elasmosaurus, which hunted fish using its long neck. Despite popular belief, it could not arc its neck like a swan out of the water, because its neck was rather stiff. The other surviving group of Cretaceous plesiosaurs took a different route. The Polycotyllidae, at first glance, resemble earlier pliosaurs, but were in fact more closely related to plesiosaurs. Some were medium-sized predators, such as the early Edgarosaurus and Plesiopurodon. However, with the rise of mosasaurs and the extinction of Ichthyosaurs, several, such as Trinocomerum and Dolichophycops, evolved highly elongated snouts and compact bodies to fill the open niche. They inhabited the western interior seaway, serving as smaller predators that were often prey to mosasaurs. With the extinction of the large pliosaurs and marine crocodilians, the seas were open for a new group of predators, the mosasaurs. Believed to have evolved from agliosaurs, which were monitor lizards. Yes, you heard that right, lizards. Now there's a stereotype of dinosaurs and pterosaurs being big lizards. This is of course incorrect, but if you were to call any of these creatures giant lizards, feel free to call mosasaurs this, because they literally are giant marine lizards. Back on topic, the Ichthyosaurus very quickly evolved into the first true mosasaurs, Dilophosaurus. They then quickly diversified into a huge number of species, because as I will highlight just 5 species found in the western interior seaway, because they illuminate the diversity of mosasaurs, and they likely lived in the general area. Starting with Halosaurus, which represents the most primitive branch of the mosasaur family. Like the aforementioned Dilophosaurus, it was at the smaller end of the size scale for mosasaurs, although bigger than him at around 13 feet. It would have been dwarfed by many of its contemporaries, however. It is believed to have lived in shallow waters, waiting around ledges for prey to come close. This is because, compared to other mosasaurs, it was a relatively poor swimmer and would have been easy prey to larger predators. Plesiocarpus was larger and better adapted to sea life. It was a member of the Pliocarpinae family, which were a group of short-skulled, short-bodied mosasaurs that were among the strongest swimmers in the mosasaur group, comparable to modern-day seals. Plesiocarpus itself was much less robust teeth, suggesting that it fed on smaller, softer prey, such as small fish and squid. Its lobed tail showed that it relied less on an eel-like motion and rather relied on its tail mainly to swim, similar to modern-day dolphins. Now let's get big with Tylosaurus. Tylosaurus was one of the largest mosasaurs, and it ate literally anything it could, including fish, sharks, plesiosaurs, pterosaurs, birds, and even smaller mosasaurs. It was a member of the subfamily of Tylosaurians, which were named after it. Due to their jaws, they seem to have been unable to catch larger turtles, such as Archelon. This was no issue, however, to the famous Mosasaurus. It was one of the last of the mosasaurs, and the largest, being slightly longer than Tylosaurus. It was also more robust than Tylosaurus, being able to tackle tougher prey. It evidently was a surface predator, not liking to dive deep, apparently preferring to hunt surface prey, such as fish. Shifting gears for the very last mosasaur I'll talk about, Globidens was a relatively average species of mosasaur size-wise. Something unique about it, however, was that unlike most other mosasaurs who had sharp peg-like teeth, Globidens had spherical teeth to crush the very common giant clams of the time. Evidently, these clams were a common food source for many creatures. Now that I have whetted your appetite, I hope you're ready for some real dinosaurs. Now before we start, I have to mention a few geography things. The western interior seaway split North America into 2 large islands, Lauramedia in the west and Appalachia to the east. Northwest Mississippi was on the southern coast of Appalachia, and thus there were only a little amount of space for dinosaurs to live. Sadly, during the Pleistocene Ice Age, many of the fossil sites were destroyed in Appalachia, and due to the general negligence Appalachia dinosaurs get, much like the people who live there currently, dinosaurs in Appalachia are way less understood than their western companions. Despite that, we do know a little about the dinosaurs that inhabited this land, and therefore can conclude a little bit about Mississippian dinosaurs. Because of the isolation Appalachia had, the dinosaurs evolved in a different direction than their western counterparts. Like in the west, tyrannosaurs were the dominant predators in Mississippi. But rather than the massive Tyrannosauridae, like the famous T-Rex, who had huge heads and pitiful arms, there were the smaller Diroptosaurs, which had longer arms and hunted in packs. Appalachia Soros is known from Mississippi and was the top predator there, at least 23 feet long, and this was just a juvenile, so the adult size is not completely known. It had larger hands, and like a Diroptosaurus itself is believed to have had hunted in packs. They were not the only carnivores here. In Mississippi, there are various bone fragments of ornithomimids like Arkansauros and an unnamed, as of now, dromaeosaur. Herbivores were also abundant and different than the West's. Hadrosaurs, which include the duck-billed dinosaurs, are believed to have evolved in Appalachia, as it's their ancestral homeland. The most famous being Ichthyosis. In fact, there was a giant species, Hypsebema, which filled the role of sauropods, which were lacking in Appalachia. The Nodosaurids were another testament of Appalachia's uniqueness. Unlike the more famous Ankylosaurs, they lacked bony clubs on the end of their tails, but made up for massive shoulder spikes. Their mouths were also more narrow, being more selective than their ankylosaur relatives. In other areas, such as Laramida, they were rare due to competition from their relatives, but here in isolation, they thrived. Last but not least of the non-avian dinosaurs was the ceratopsians. The more advanced and famous larger forms, such as Triceratops, were absent from Appalachia, but there were numerous leptoceratopsids in the southern half of the continent, which were more primitive bipedal relatives of Triceratops. Speaking of birds, several are known from the coast of Appalachia. Two worth mentioning are Ichthyornis and Hesperornis. Ichthyornis was very similar to modern birds and appeared to fill a niche that modern gulls do. Hesperornis was much more bizarre, resembling a cross between a marabou stork and a penguin. It was common prey for larger sharks, mosasaurs, and the X-fish. Both birds had something modern birds lack, however: teeth. Pterosaurs also soared in the sky, unhindered by the ocean, existed on both the coast of Mississippi and Laramida. The most famous of them was Pterodon, who occasionally fell prey to the mosasaurs that inhabited the seas. Crocodilians, too, were very well represented here as well. 5 species are known from Appalachia. They included the garvils, Eothecosaurus, and Thoracosaurus, the alligator Lediosuchus, and the crocodile Boreosuchus. However, the most famous of them, and the only one we have records of in Mississippi, was Deinosuchus, one of the largest crocodiles to ever exist, at a whopping 39 feet long. Compare that to the modern saltwater crocodile, which is, on average, only 20 feet long. There was also a fair diversity of non-marine turtles, including Adochus, Boreothemis, and even the soft-shell turtles, which are still alive today. There are also many endemic lizards. Amphibians also flourished, with the frog genus Eoplebobates actually surviving the asteroid impact. There's also the limbless salamanders and a giant relative of modern sirens, Hadrosaurus. This was one of the largest true amphibians at a massive 1.6 meters. Very paltry compared to the extinct Temnospondyli. Where our ancestors? Well, we were still in the shadows of the dinosaurs, but we had diversified quite rapidly. In Mississippi, there were likely Tylodont mototibulates, such as Mesodema or Chimelodon, as well as Megatherians, which are all mammals closely related to marsupials than to placentals. These included Alpidon and a stegodont, which were surprisingly large for the time. Alas, this entire world ended in the most famous and most misunderstood extinction of all time. Now, it is true that an asteroid hit Mexico and killed quite a few dinosaurs, but it was not the impact that killed the dinosaurs, nor did it only kill big things, nor did it only kill dinosaurs. Let's clear up the first problem. The dust resulting from the impact blocked out the sun, leading to the death of plants, which led to the death of herbivores and those that fed on them, in both the land and sea. Secondly, many things went extinct prior to this time. Stegosaurus, Ichthyosaurus, and the last representatives of both Dicynodonts and Temnospondyls all went extinct during the early Cretaceous, many years before the asteroid hit. Thirdly, many things survived this event. Whether it was our ancestors, no duh, but also crocodiles, toothless birds, nautiloids, multitubulates, Albanerptosaurs, and Cloidosaurs all survived. Sadly, those last three went extinct later. Apparently the Grim Reaper wanted to play catch-up, I guess. Sadly, it's true that the KT extinction event caused the extinction of the great reptiles. But this was a good thing, for it allowed mammals to take over, with a few bumps in the road. We will explore this further in the next episode of The History of Mississippi.